Yeah.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. I'm Dave Turner, along with Pat Pickens, and we're past that magical mark now, where the U.S. Thanksgiving is like the line of demarcation, where teams that are in the playoff bracket tend to usually be in the bracket 80% when all is said and done. We'll get into that in a little bit. We have a good smattering of different topics for today, but we're going to start with one that I think is a polarizing issue: the Matt Bolesky hit on Derek Stepan, and just the Department of Player Safety in general and how they're dealing with these hits. Pat, what's your initial take on some of this? Maybe amongst the hit itself, but also on a broad scale of how they're dealing with these issues around the league now.
Well, it's interesting because it hasn't really been a topic, which is amazing because it feels like we see these videos to explain um, suspensions, to explain fines, to explain whatever, and it hasn't really been a trend. And now all of a sudden, we reach Thanksgiving. It wasn't gonna be that way forever, obviously. So the thing is, yeah, the Bolesky hit's bad, no doubt about it. I think what's fun, Dave, and we get to this in a minute too, is the fallout after that with between that and then Brad Marchand's hit on Henrik Lundqvist, who went, believe what you want, it went down pretty easily in Friday's game. But I think, they have a tough job, Department of Player Safety. It's a thankless job too, because um, you want to see players on the ice. You want to see your best players play. I mean, Boston wants Matt Bolesky on the ice. Um, they just gave him a whole ton of money to come into Boston, and they wanted to see him, on the ice playing well. The Bruins have won 5 straight games as of this recording. So you want, Bolesky, for as much maligned as that contract was when he signed it, when the Bruins gave it to him in the offseason, um, he's a major player. He's their top 6. 10 points, 8 assists. Doesn't have the goal totals, but 10 points. And so it's interesting. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday off air about the fact you want to, and I agree with you. You want to punish the hit, the play, not the injury, which is fair. But this is, Derek Stepan seems to be a target at times.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we were talking about that the other day, and I really do believe that's the case. I know the rule is that it's supposed to be, if it's a late hit, it has to be within point
6.
Yeah, I think it's point 8 though. One of the two. After the play happens, which is obviously something that they have to look at the video, and in real time, that's really, really fast.
Yeah,
No
doubt.
And here's the thing: I get it that there's going to be hits that are dirty, and maybe a guy walks away completely unscathed from it. If it's a dirty hit, it's a dirty hit. But in the same regard, though, if the guy has his head up and the player who's doing the hit is not leading with an elbow or aiming for the head, if the guy loses his balance and goes headfirst into the boards, I hate to say it, but if the intent and the hit itself are not dirty, I don't think you can start punishing that, because that's part of the game. It's one thing. Look, if there's guys running at people, if you look at Matt Cook a few years ago, even the thing with Tyson Barrie in the playoffs, those were dirty hits, and we've seen them even 10, 15 years ago. We saw more of it, but
yeah,
I just feel like there's a fine line that I get it. They have to protect the stars. You don't want to see guys getting hurt because they're being targeted and getting away with it. Yeah. But to me, there is still a very big difference between what everyone can perceive as a clean hit, just a good hockey play, and being late and being dirty.
And I think you have to err on the side, though, of penalizing players, because you look at that. The Bolesky hit's late for sure, I would say, and it's in a precarious position because Stepan's near the boards, and he's just gotten rid of the puck and he's skating up the ice, and it doesn't matter that he's one of the Rangers' major players. It could, but it doesn't, in my estimation. So you get that but the hit's late, and it's a bad hit, and now Stepan's out 4 to 6 weeks, and Matt Bolesky hasn't gotten anything. Now, I mean, I'm not one of these people who cares one way or the other if it's Derek Stepan, if it's Sidney Crosby, if it's there's a lot of guys who get preferential treatment in a lot of sports, but it shouldn't matter. But to the league, it probably does.
Yeah, and there's a couple schools of thought on this too. There's one where the ridiculous thought that if a player is injured as a result of a dirty hit, that the player who does the injuring should be out as long as the guy who's
that's
out for it. That's ridiculous. And then I think that you have to look at it, and also the idea of guys being repeat offenders.
Yeah.
I'm not big on that either, just because I think that if you have a guy, say a Matt Cook or something like that, who hits a guy and it's clean, should he get suspended because it's questionable, as opposed to any other player lacing him up tonight and absolutely train wrecking someone with an elbow to the head, but because he's been an angel and never hurt anyone before, that he should get less? To me, I really think when it comes down to it, at least in my opinion, it has to be looked at as the play itself every time. That it shouldn't matter what you did before. It shouldn't matter the injury. It's the play itself and how it's determined to be red. Either it's dirty or it's late or whatever. I think that's where they have to do it. And we'll see, because, look, it's not going to be the last time.
I agree with you in some regard, but maybe shrink the window in terms of repeat offenders. Like, you want to have a repeat offender from in one calendar season, if the guy's getting, because like you said, if there's guys who play on that edge, Corey Perry's one of those guys, and people pay to see Corey Perry score goals, but he plays to that, and part of being a hockey player is playing to that edge, I mean, that you want a guy who's tough and skilled and stands up for his teammates, but you don't want players to, you don't want guys missing 4 to 6 weeks for questionable hits, for dirty hits. I mean, you look at,
we definitely don't want the game going there.
No,
but bridging this topic now to what was the Brandon Dubinsky, Sidney Crosby thing. But we'll get away from the actual idea of the player safety stuff. But I'm so happy John Tortorella is back in the league, just because I think he makes it more interesting, and I do love the way his teams play, because I'm a defense first kind of grinding out sort of guy. We're getting the rivalry between Columbus and Pittsburgh that I think the NHL has always wanted, especially when they moved Columbus into that division.
Yeah.
Just because of what's going on now with Tortorella calling the Penguins whiners. It's making for some, it's like a soap opera. And you know what? It's good for the league, because I'll tell you right now, I'm going to watch the next time Columbus plays Pittsburgh. Again, basically for those who haven't heard about it, after the two teams played, Tortorella making some comments, calling the Penguins whiners. I can't give you the exact quote, but Pat, what do you make of this? Is it kind of ridiculous, or does it add some spice to the games? And I happen to think that's a good thing.
I was going to say, this all started with Columbus and Pittsburgh in the playoff series a couple of years ago. And, Columbus they've been searching for a natural rival in Columbus basically since their existence. It was supposed to be Detroit, because they were the two Eastern time zone teams in the Western Conference. And that kind of fizzled out. And then, the Blue Jackets, I mean, we both agree, Dave, that rivalries should spark organically, because you look at if you watch the rivalry nights and you see these haphazard kind of thrown together games you get, like Detroit and Montreal we had a couple weeks ago. I mean, it's an original six. So or it was Detroit and Washington. I'm sorry, which isn't even a rivalry. They played in the Stanley Cup Finals once, like 15 years ago, or 17 years ago. So they need to happen organically, and how does it happen? You get that with playoff series. The Rangers and Capitals have played each other in the playoffs, 5 years in a row, something like that. The Islanders and Penguins played that playoff series a few years ago. The Blue Jackets and Penguins played the playoff series a few years ago. And obviously the proximity in in distance and whatnot, because Pittsburgh fans flock to Columbus. They have that whole Western Pennsylvania, Ohio thing where the Big Ten country type story. We had Jack Johnson on last year, and he talked to us about the Ohio-Michigan rivalry, but it's just as fierce. But there's been a lot of moves that Columbus has made with teams, like the Rangers and the Penguins. There's a lot of former Rangers on Columbus's roster, and like I said, the proximity to Pittsburgh sparks something. So having Tortorella kind of stoke those flames is awesome, I think, especially since Columbus is really not going anywhere this year. They need to have something to play for. Now, with that said, Brandon Dubinsky needs to. I mean, it's fun that he likes to pick on Sidney Crosby. Remember, the Florida Panthers used to do that to Crosby a few years ago. Until a few years ago, where they had a few guys who were able to get under his skin and take him off his game. And Dubinsky does that. Has been doing that with Crosby for years. But the cross check's bad. Or, it probably should have been suspended more than one game. But, we touched on the department player safety stuff already. I think it's more about, firing his team up. It's interesting, though, because Mike Johnston is so classy and so well-spoken, the coach of the Penguins. And, he doesn't have that same laser focus on the Blue Jackets that the Blue Jackets have on him. Now, if he's going to take liberty with his players, he might start. And Pittsburgh, could have handled that the best way possible by winning the game, of course. So, all in all, I think like you said, Torts is great just because he's antagonistic. He's frustrating to deal with from a media perspective, but no one cares about us. But yeah, it's fun to hear Torts pop off about the Penguins, especially since they have the history of the division rivalry through the years. Torts was with the Rangers, and they were division rivalry. They were division rivals with Pittsburgh for the entire time there. So I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is a good thing. The Dubinsky hit, though, I agree. I think that there's a line that you shouldn't really have to cross. You could be antagonistic. I think that's great. That's part of the game. That's absolutely within the rules, and you're doing your job out there because win with any means necessary within the rules.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest thing to me is you don't want it to be a situation where guys can get out of control too easy, and that there's going to be dirty plays that are going to take guys out of the lineup. That's just my thought on that. But overall,
Dave,
it is another
real fast though. Columbus is dead still, right?
You would think so,
because there's 7 points out of a playoff spot.
That's not a lot of ground to make up. They can make it up
a lot, but we'll get to it, because in the era of 3-point games,
mm-hmm.
It is, and they're about to climb out of the basement, and they're playing better under Torts. 6 of 10 they've won. Their record is 10-8 since he took over. So, they're a better than 500 team with him. It's just a lot of ground to make up. But yeah, no, I'll say they're toast for now.
Yeah, anything could change. But one good feel-good story. I know Toronto. It's been such a lost year, but they've actually had good goaltending. Guy by the name of
Jonathan Bernier might beg to differ about that.
Yeah,
those of us who watch John Bernier. But James Reimer's been fantastic. But that's beside the point. Go on. I'm sorry.
Yes, Reimer's been good. Bernier not so much, but they found a spark last night in Garrett Sparks, a guy, journeyman who hasn't had a lot of AHL games to his resume. He comes up and plays. He's wearing these fantastic checkered pads with the Leafs logo in there, which are great in themselves. And he goes out and stops all 24 shots against to get a shutout in his first career start in the NHL. And afterwards, he was interviewed on the ice after being named the first star. He gave his stick to a fan. And he was overcome by emotion. And there's some people who will use choice words to say that he is, he's not a tough guy or whatever.
Soft.
But you know what, though? I happen to really like it. In a world where there's some athletes who you have to wonder if they even really care about their team, that it's all about the money, I think the NHL has always been the guys are team guys for the most part. And I think we saw that. This kid, probably since he was, playing Pee-wee hockey, has dreamed of this moment, and he goes out there and gets a shutout in his first game. And go ahead, be emotional. We always complain about athletes being robots and giving cookie cutter answers, and all of a sudden this guy, is really emotional about it. I think it's fantastic. To me, I can't see why anyone would have a problem with that, especially if you're a Leafs fan, because this kid cares.
Yeah. No, I would second that. And I think what's interesting is we saw Andrew Hammond do it last year in Ottawa, and it was a lot of things with them, but it was Dave Cameron's system. It was a bunch of goals scored by a bunch of younger players, and then it was Andrew Hammond kind of carrying them. And why can't Garrett Sparks do that? I mean, I know, like you said, it's a great story because he came pretty much from nowhere. I mean, how many guys? He's a 7th-round draft pick. He played as recently as last year. He played the bulk of his games in the East Coast League. He hasn't made a real a high volume of starts, even in the American League. But, like you said, if there's maybe a spark, I mean, they're playing well under Babcock. They're playing inspired. It's just, like I said, John Bernier kind of has put them in a hole early, and Reimer's kind of fishing them out of it. They're not scoring a lot of goals either, but we expected that given, their personnel. But, I mean, who knows? Maybe this kid comes in and sparks his team. But if nothing else, like you said, it's a great story.
It is, and certainly, with Toronto, they're years away. But you know what? Having another goaltender that they could either use and maybe trade one of the other guys, or what? That's how you're going to get out of it. I know, you and I both kind of agree with the building from the net out mentality.
Yeah.
And you know what? If they're gonna ever get out of this hole, it's probably going to be because they find goaltending that can keep them in games. Look what Corey Schneider is doing for the New Jersey Devils right now. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how you can bridge the gap with a team that maybe doesn't have enough talent.
I was going to say Henrik Lundqvist with the Rangers right now.
Yeah, but that's a talented team, though. I mean, we would all agree that even with a middle-of-the-road goaltender, the Rangers are probably at least a playoff team.
Maybe, but we'll get to that. I think one of my favorite stories of the year, maybe not my favorite story of the year because it's so polarizing.
Yeah.
But you get to this point where it's really interesting that there's a lot of scrutiny under Patrick Kane for a lot of reasons. He's got the new contract. We talked a lot last year about last year being the end for Chicago just because they had to do a lot of cap restructuring. And, they did it and they won the cup and whatnot. But and they really didn't play that well out of the gate. A couple of bad losses, a couple of, strange losses. They got swept by the Devils this year, which was very bizarre. But one consistent with them has been Patrick Kane. Like I said, he's much maligned. He's going to be maligned. He hasn't suffered the wrath of visiting fans I thought he would have. But Dave, this guy's out of his mind right now. He was just named the NHL's first star for the month of November. He has 37 points in 24 games so far. He has 23 assists. And, I mean, you look at any number of things that could have derailed him, whether it was the injury last year, whether it was the distraction of what supposedly went down in Buffalo or what may or may not have went down in Buffalo. And then, all the media circus that surrounded him. And he's off to a pretty damn good start, Dave.
Yeah, he's been incredible. And here's the thing: I don't want to get into any of that other stuff because it's a non-issue right now, and we're never really going to know. So speculating makes no sense. But regardless of the outcome of it, I think that sometimes the game, when even for us normal people that work sometimes when you have other stuff going on in your life, becomes your outlet because it's just a way where you can do what sometimes you like or at least are good at. And you can kind of funnel your energy into your job. Yeah. And I think that maybe that's what we're seeing from Patrick Kane is that he's using the game that he's unbelievably gifted at to get away from maybe all the other distractions and stuff. Regardless of the case, he's been so good. it's mind-boggling. I mean, every single night. And you know what? As much as we think that Chicago probably can't do it this year, I don't know, because they have some really good young kids that are starting, Tara Vinen and Artemi Panarin and Van Riemsdyk. I think the fact that they have him, Taves, Hossa, and then the 3 defensemen that are all pretty good as well, and Corey Crawford, for what he's worth, has won. You can't count them out, especially the way Kane is playing. I mean, how many times have we seen it in the playoffs where they need a goal and Kane just holds the puck and makes something happen? And if he's going to play this well, I mean, I would like to see someone make me a case as to why you don't think that Chicago has a good chance to win the Cup this year, because based on their track record and the fact that they have a guy like Kane playing at this level, why not?
Yeah, I agree, especially when you consider that you can't almost, that old adage, you can't rule them out because they have whoever and whoever. And that's definitely a big part of it. Dave, 19 straight games with a point for Kane.
Unbelievable.
He's still about 40% of the way from Wayne Gretzky's record. Wayne Gretzky's record is 51 games. He only has 2 games without a point this year, Kane does. You don't think there's any way that he's going to catch Gretzky, is it?
It would be interesting, and if he gets to maybe 25 or 26 and he's more than half the way there, there's a chance, but I don't know. I think it would be really difficult for him to basically do what he's already done and then a little more after that, to be able to go 51 straight games, especially in this day and age where there's not quite as much goal scoring, and he doesn't – no offense to anyone on the Blackhawks, but he doesn't quite have what Wayne Gretzky had. No. I mean, that's another world all to begin with. But
yeah,
it would be interesting if he gets close. If he gets to the 25, 20, even 30 mark, maybe you could start wondering about it. To me, that one would be quite almost, especially because the game is different now. That would be almost as impressive, I think, as the Joe DiMaggio hit streak in baseball. Just because you don't see guys being able to have an impact every single night like Kane has been able to.
What's interesting too, Kane hasn't posted points in 2 games this season. They were shut out in Philadelphia on a rivalry night game, and then the Blackhawks posted 1 goal in Washington the night after, and on October 15th it's been, Dave. So we were talking about Halloween when the streak started, and now we're getting into the holiday season, so it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he can keep it going and just how far he can take this team, because I think based on their pedigree, I think you'd be foolish to expect anything less than this team being there in the end, especially because we'll get into the division in a second here as soon as we're done with this, but as much as that division is a murderer's row, who usually comes out on top in that division?
The Blackhawks. Chicago. So, yeah, you alluded to it, and we'll get to it. We'll do it here. Dave, your beloved Central Division is very top-heavy at the moment. You have Dallas, St. Louis, Chicago. You have Nashville, Minnesota are all in playoff spots in the West. Vancouver's just 1 game, 1 point out. Anaheim's lurking there, still 3. Minnesota's struggling here a little bit lately. Just 4-4-2 in their last 10. Winnipeg's had a problem, and Colorado's not good at all. But if you were going to pick one team, Dave, that is currently outside the playoffs in both the East and West to get hot and make the postseason, who do you have?
I think at West it's easy. I think it's Anaheim. Yeah. Maybe they don't. Look, they're only 6 points out of the division lead, and the Kings are not going to run away with it because that's not the Kings. They'll. I think they're going to make the playoffs for sure this year. Yeah. Los Angeles, but you look at San Jose. They were really good, then really bad, then really good again.
Yeah, Brent Burns, such a catalyst for them.
He does some amazing things. But even Arizona, who's the darling, like Colorado 2 years ago, like Calgary last year, that everyone says, how the hell are they going to make the playoffs? Well, statistically, it'll say that they should make the playoffs, but it just means they're going to be terrible the next year. And then after that, which I sure hope is not the case because I love watching that team. But to me, I would think that Anaheim, especially because look, they're only 4 points back of Arizona. And if you want to tell me that the Anaheim Ducks can't be 5 points better than Arizona right now throughout the rest of the season, absolutely. Look, the Ducks have some flaws, and maybe they're not quite as good as maybe I expected because I expected them to go to the finals this year. I can't see them not making it. And out east, I want to say Tampa Bay, but I'm not going to. I am actually going to say the New Jersey Devils. Why? Because of the goaltending. Corey Schneider has been so good at times. He made a save against Montreal this weekend, full extension glove save. Would have been the number one web gem on ESPN if they actually knew what hockey was. He's been keeping them in games, and they've had enough scoring. And I like their grit. I like the fact that they keep coming back. Maybe it would be tough, I think, for them to get into one of the top 3 seeds in that division. But I absolutely think that they can be a wild card, whether it's ending up playing against Montreal or playing Capitals/Rangers, perhaps. I think that when you look at them, they seem like they have right now a better ability to kind of grind out games. Tampa's been up and down too much. They'll go out and they'll blow someone out, and then they'll get blown out the next night. There's a reason why they're 11-11-3 because they can't find anything, any sort of consistency. So maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong because I do want Tampa in the playoffs, but that's my pick. Pat, what about you? Who are your 2 outliers?
It'd be easy to say Anaheim, but you remember last year when Tampa Bay said it got up to play Montreal and the Rangers? I mean, the Coyotes are doing that right now. They haven't lost yet to the Ducks this season. They're 3-0. In head-to-head. I know that there's a lot more games to be played, not head-to-head games than there are. But if those are going to decide those 4 or 5 head-to-head, I think they play 5 times this year. 5 times this year. Then they're then they're going to get up for those games. I would like to agree with you because I agree with you in terms of the Devils in the East because Schneider's good. I have a hard time believing they're going to hang around in that division just because the division. It's not that I don't think they're good enough. It's that the division is loaded, and is the division going to get 5 teams in the playoffs? I think the Devils' problem right now is they're not. There's a lot of. Schneider's keeping them in games, but they're not getting a lot of depth in terms of goal scoring. They basically have 2 lines scoring. They're -1 goal differential. And I think Schneider's going to keep them in games, but like I said, you look at the murderer's row ahead of them right now, and it's Rangers, Caps, Islanders, Penguins. It's 4, and if the Metro is not going to get 5, I don't think any of the top 4 above them is going to get in. I would say Tampa, just because. It's hard to get up for games after that run to the finals. It's hard to do that. It's a short summer. They've had a lot of injury problems. They have the distraction of Stamkos's contract, and you just wonder. They're getting everyone's best right now, and I agree with you that the goal suppression is a problem, but I think Tampa's going to find it. Now, I don't know about the other teams in the Atlantic, just because Ottawa has 9 row and is only 3 points ahead of the Devils right now in terms of that. So in terms of points right now. So the Atlantic's not very good. If it could get 5 teams, I think Detroit is playing over its head right now a little bit, but Dylan Larkin's just been so good. I would say Tampa in the East, although don't discount Florida too, who's just kind of lurking there in 6th place. In the West, I don't like Vancouver. I don't like.
Neither of us do, and they've kind of proven us wrong the last few years. But I think this is the year that they really fall back down to earth. Just because, look at all the teams in their division. I think any of the teams that are ahead of them, even including Anaheim, who's just 2 points behind them.
Yeah,
I don't think is Vancouver better than any of those teams. I don't think so.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the thing is, the problem I have with with Anaheim right now is you just want to see it, and the goal differential's been is not very good at all. I mean, we talked a lot about the goal differential last year, and it wasn't very good either. But I'm going to say Anaheim. I'm going to take the chalk in the East and West and say Anaheim and Tampa. I like Florida. You know, I don't know if anyone else down there is noticing what they're doing, but I'm going to say Anaheim and Tampa. Although, you know, if Winnipeg pulls a trade for Travis Hamonic, I might kind of pull back on that because they've quietly been the second worst defensive team in the Western Conference. They've given up 80 goals, which with the defensemen that they have, I mean that 80 goals is second most in the whole sport. So I mean with the defense they have with Bufflin and Trouba and Tyler Myers and those type of guys, that's a little surprising. But I'm going to say Anaheim and Tampa.
It is, yeah. I think as a whole, we might see the playoffs probably right now. I think are going to be pretty close to where they are, save for maybe if you want to just put Anaheim and Tampa Bay in there at the expense of someone along the way. I think the one spot to me that it's so close right now that you don't know where it's going to end up, but to me, the Atlantic Division is really interesting just because, assuming Montreal, even without Carey Price for a little bit, I think it's safe to say that they are going to win that division. But outside of it, it's Ottawa, Detroit, and Boston who are separated by 2 points right now. And then 4 points separate them from Tampa Bay. So really, I mean, within the course of a week, those teams could actually flip-flop. I mean, you could have Tampa Bay being the 2 seed, Boston being the 3, and then all of a sudden Ottawa and Detroit may be out of it. So, that kind of thing. I think you could see a lot of movement there. But as far as the West goes, I mean, look, I think those teams are pretty set. Other than maybe Anaheim making it, I don't think Winnipeg has the horses to make a run at this point. Vancouver has been so unimpressive. I think the matchups are going to be really what's fascinating out West. I mean, San Jose, Arizona would be really cool just because it guarantees that one of them is going to be in the second round, almost much like Calgary and Vancouver last year, where it was cool because you have these two teams that you probably don't think are contenders, but regardless, one of them is going to be playing for a chance to get to the conference finals. St. Louis, Chicago, I mean, I'm sure St. Louis is thinking, how the hell can we avoid this damn team? They're probably beside themselves. I mean, if you're St. Louis, do you tank to get the wild card and maybe play the Kings or something like that? I don't know.
Do you want to see the Kings though? The Kings have had to hit their
maybe they take the chances over Chicago, but I mean Dallas and Minnesota would be interesting because Minnesota actually has played them well this year, and of course there's a kind of rivalry, I guess. I don't know if it really matters so much anymore. With the fact that Dallas was Minnesota. I think people even forget that at this point. It's been so long. I think it's going to be great, and we'll see some movement. And look, I guess my question is, all right, here for you, a team that's on no one's radar, and I know you mentioned Florida, so we can't mention them now, but Ottawa last year was dead to rights. They were nowhere near a playoff spot. Last thing before we go here, who's your team that's really far down that can make an Ottawa-like move and get themselves into the playoffs?
I think the only team that could do it is Columbus because the talent's there. They were so bad defensively for the first basically month of the season. But, 7 points is a lot. But if anybody has the horses to make up 7, I mean, look at they're finally getting out of the basement already in the Metro. And then, once they get out of there, it's only Philly then. And then, I think nobody wants to see Columbus because they have some pedigree. They have the goalie. They have a structure now. And, if Torts has given them some confidence, I think that's the only team, I would say the only team in either conference that could come all the way out of it and make a playoff run, just because we all thought they were a playoff team before the year. We thought they were a lock for the playoffs before the year, and that, like you said, you mentioned the Atlantic Division. That Atlantic Division is very unimpressive, even despite Boston's 5-game win streak. You just wonder if the Blue Jackets can get back into it and make things interesting, and whether that Dubinsky thing with Crosby was the start of it.
It's certainly going to be fascinating. And as we get closer to the holiday season and the new year, we're going to find out even more. But I've said it a couple times. I really like this regular season. There's just a lot of cool stories that are popping up. Even just what we led with today, I think there's a little bit of pizzazz to it where every night something is occurring, maybe not always good, but something is happening, and it's giving us talking points, and it's making for some fun games, and that's all we can ask for.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Pat, we're gonna take care of it now, but we will be back next week. I'm Dave Turner along with Pat Pickens. This is Puck Talk. We'll catch you next time.